General Cornwallis looked at me and saw a slave, a body to carry his things, a pair of hands to serve his food, a set of ears that could not possibly understand what was being said around them. That was his mistake. Every conversation at that table, every map on that desk, every order he gave to his officers, I heard, I remembered, I wrote it down, and I smuggled it out. I was fighting a war for a country that did not consider me a citizen, for a freedom I was not allowed to have, and I did it from inside the enemy's own tent, serving him dinner while I stole his secrets. They called it treason. I called it justice.
Welcome back to After Hours. I am Vaughn. The American Revolution was won at Yorktown, Virginia on October 19, 1781. Every schoolchild in America knows that. George Washington. The French fleet. Cornwallis surrendering his sword. What they do not teach you is who gave Washington the intelligence that made Yorktown possible. Who told the Americans exactly where Cornwallis was going, how many men he had, what his fortifications looked like, what his plans were. That intelligence came from a spy, a double agent operating inside Cornwallis's own headquarters. A man who served the British general his meals, who stood in the corner while officers discussed strategy, who was so thoroughly invisible that no one ever suspected him. He was invisible because he was enslaved, and in 1781 Virginia, an enslaved black man was not a person, he was furniture. His name was James Armistead, and after helping win the war that created the United States of America, he was sent back to slavery. This is episode 11, The Double Agent. James Armistead was born around 1748 on a plantation in New Kent County, Virginia. He was enslaved by a man named William Armistead, who served as Virginia's state commissary of military supplies during the Revolution. James served as William's personal attendant, his body servant. He knew the roads of Virginia, he knew the rivers, he knew the plantations and the people who owned them. In the spring of 1781, the British invaded Virginia. Benedict Arnold, who had already betrayed the American cause, led British forces through the state, burning supplies and terrorizing the population. Lord Cornwallis, the senior British commander in the South, was pushing north with 10,000 men. On March 14th, the Marquis de Lafayette arrived in Virginia with a small continental force to oppose the invasion. Lafayette was 23 years old, French, idealistic, and desperately outnumbered. James went to his owner and asked for something extraordinary.
Mr. Armistead, I want to serve. Let me go to the Marquis. Let me fight for the cause.
You are my property, James. This is not your war.
It is everyone's war. If you will give me leave, I will go to the Marquis de Lafayette. I will serve however he sees fit.
William Armistead, perhaps seeing an opportunity to contribute to the war effort through his human property, granted permission. James traveled to Lafayette's camp and presented himself. Lafayette looked at James and saw something that no one else saw. Not a servant, not a piece of property, a weapon.
You know this country. You know the roads, the farms, the rivers.
Yes, sir. I have lived here my entire life.
And if you walked into a British camp, what would they see?
They would see a runaway slave looking for work, looking for food, looking for protection. They would see exactly what they expect to see.
Precisely. Mr. Armistead, I am going to ask you to do something very dangerous. I am asking you to become a spy.
James walked into Benedict Arnold's camp at Portsmouth, Virginia, posing as a runaway slave willing to serve the British. It was the simplest cover story in the world. An enslaved man fleeing his owner, seeking refuge behind British lines. The British had been actively encouraging enslaved people to run from patriot slaveholders, offering freedom in exchange for service. Arnold accepted him without question. James served food. He carried supplies. He guided British troops through local roads that he knew intimately. And every night, he memorized what he had seen and heard. Troop numbers, supply routes, which roads the British planned to use, which towns they planned to attack. He fed all of it back to Lafayette through a network of American spies who operated between the lines. By the end of July, James had worked his way deeper into the British command. He was now serving in the headquarters of Lord Cornwallis himself. And then Cornwallis did something that would change the war. He turned to James and gave him a new assignment.
You know the Patriot countryside, do you not?
Yes, my lord. I know it well. I escaped from a Patriot plantation.
Good. I want you to go to the American lines, move among them, bring me information about Lafayette's forces, his numbers, his positions, his plans.
Cornwallis had just asked his enemy's spy to spy on his enemy. James Armistead was now a double agent. He was nominally working for both sides. In reality, every piece of genuine intelligence went to Lafayette, and every report he gave Cornwallis was carefully crafted misinformation. He inflated Lafayette's troop numbers to make Cornwallis cautious. He downplayed American preparations to keep the British off guard, and he reported Cornwallis's real plans, in detail, back to the Americans. Lafayette called him a very sensible fellow. He called James his honest friend, his correspondent. James served Cornwallis dinner while carrying the plans that would destroy him in his pocket. In late July of 1781, James sent his most critical intelligence report. Cornwallis was moving 10,000 troops from Portsmouth to a small tobacco port on the York River, a town called Yorktown. He confirmed that Cornwallis planned to fortify the position and wait for reinforcements by sea. He identified the vulnerability. If the French fleet could block the Chesapeake Bay, Cornwallis would be trapped. No escape by sea. No reinforcements. A siege. Lafayette forwarded this intelligence to General Washington. Washington coordinated with the French General Rochambeau and the French Admiral de Grasse. The trap was set. In late September of 1781, the combined American and French forces surrounded Yorktown. The French fleet sealed the Chesapeake. Cornwallis was cut off. The siege lasted 3 weeks. American and French artillery pounded the British fortifications day and night. On October 19th, Cornwallis sent out a drummer and a white flag. The most powerful army in the world had surrendered. The American Revolution was effectively over. When Cornwallis came to Lafayette's headquarters to discuss the terms of surrender, he walked into the tent and stopped. Standing there on the American side was a familiar face. The man who had served him dinner. The man he had trusted with his own espionage operations.
You rogue. You have been playing me a trick all this time.
James said nothing. He did not need to. The war was won. The trick was over. And then came the part of the story that nobody tells you. The part that makes this not a triumph, but a tragedy. James went home, to slavery. The war was over. Freedom had been won. But not for James Armistead. He had helped secure the independence of a nation that classified him as 3/5 of a person. He had risked his life behind enemy lines. He had provided the intelligence that made the decisive victory possible. And when it was done, he was returned to his owner like a borrowed tool. In 1782, Virginia passed a law granting freedom to enslaved men who had served in the Continental Army. But the law had a catch. It applied to soldiers, men who had carried weapons and served in the ranks. James was classified as a spy. He had never carried a weapon. He had served with his mind, not a musket. The law did not apply to him. James petitioned the Virginia Assembly for his freedom. His first petition went nowhere and never even reached a committee vote before the legislative session ended. 3 years passed. James remained enslaved. The nation he had helped create was building its government, writing its constitution, arguing about liberty and justice. and the man who had made it possible served dinner on a plantation. Then, in November of 1784, the Marquis de Lafayette wrote a letter.
This is to certify that the bearer by the name of James has done essential services to me, while I had the honor to command in this state. His intelligence from the enemy's camp were industriously collected and most faithfully delivered. He properly acquitted himself with some important commissions I gave him, and appears to me entitled to every reward his situation can admit of.
Armed with Lafayette's letter, James petitioned the Virginia Assembly again in November of 1786. This time, his owner, William Armistead, now a member of the House of Delegates, supported the petition. On January 9, 1787, the governor of Virginia signed the order. 6 years after Yorktown, 6 years of slavery after helping win the war, James Armistead was finally free. He chose a new name. He added Lafayette to his own, James Armistead Lafayette, a free man, named for the Frenchman who had seen him as a human being when no one else would. He bought 40 acres in New Kent County. He became a farmer. He married. He had children. He collected a small pension of $40 a year from the state of Virginia. In 1824, 43 years after Yorktown, the Marquis de Lafayette returned to America for a farewell tour. He was 67 years old. He traveled through every state, received as a hero everywhere he went. In Richmond, Virginia, Lafayette rode through the streets in an open carriage while crowds cheered. Thousands lined the road. Dignitaries waved. It was a celebration of everything the Revolution had achieved. And then Lafayette saw a face in the crowd. He ordered his carriage to stop. He stood up, he climbed down into the street, and he walked through the crowd to an old man standing quietly at the edge of the road.
James, my friend, my honest friend.
The Marquis de Lafayette, one of the most famous men in the world, embraced James Armistead Lafayette in front of thousands of people. The French aristocrat who had crossed an ocean to fight for liberty held the formerly enslaved spy who had risked everything from the inside. A portrait was painted of James that year. It hangs today in the Valentine Museum in Richmond. An old man in a dark coat, looking directly at the viewer. No uniform, no medals, no sword. Just a man who changed the course of a war and waited 6 years for his country to remember. James Armistead Lafayette died on August 9, 1830. His burial place is unknown. He wrote one sentence in his petition to the Virginia Assembly that says everything you need to know about James Armistead Lafayette. He was seeking, and I am quoting him now, that freedom which he flatters himself he has in some degree contributed to establish. In some degree, he helped win the Revolutionary War. He provided the intelligence that led to the most important victory in American history. He served inside the enemy's tent, eating their food, listening to their plans, smuggling their secrets out in his pockets. And when he asked for his freedom, he described his contribution as, in some degree. That is what it means to be invisible, to do the most important